Welcome to this DaVinci Resolve Fusion node breakdown. Today's node is the Surface Tracker node. And the Surface Tracker node is a new node within DaVinci Resolve Fusion 20, and it allows us to apply textures and effects to flexible or deformed moving surfaces like cloth or skin. So let's go ahead and jump into Fusion, and I'm going to hit Shift Space and add a Surface Tracker. And how the Surface Tracker operates is it's fairly simple. We've got these menu systems going from left to right, and this is pretty much how you use this node. So first we want to create bounds, and what your bounds are your areas you want to track. So when you're creating your bounds, you want to make sure you're staying within the area you want to track and not going outside. So if we want to track our face, we don't want to track this hair or the background because it's going to throw our mesh off. So let's go ahead and create our first bound. So if I click this plus bound, I want to add a bound, and we're going to add the bounds of the area we want to create our mesh in. So there we go. And right here on this boundary drop-down menu, this is just showing the different boundaries we created. So this bound 1 was created by default when we input the node. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. Now we can add holes in our meshes as well. So if I click this hole button and I want to keep our eyes out of the mesh and the track, I can add a hole. And if I want to add another one, I can just select this add hole and add another hole. So now we've got 2 holes on our eyes. If I go in this boundary, you can see we've got a drop down so we can select which bounds we are working with, whether it's bound 1, hole 1, hole 2, or we can add more bounds if we want. And again, this button will delete whatever boundary we're set to, and this will clear all your boundaries. Now, while you're on this little display area, we can manipulate our little bounds. So if I just click and drag, we can drag. If I want to add another one, I can just click on this line and add another one. If I want to select multiple bounds, I can hold the control button and click and drag, and now I selected all these bounds. So now I can come in here and I can manipulate all those together. Additionally, if I hold the Alt Option key, I can delete if I wanted to, or re-add it. Now, once we've got all our bounds set up, we want to move over to the mesh option. And this is going to create the actual mesh that's going to be used for tracking our surface. And right here we have regenerate mesh. So if something messed up or you change something, you can regenerate your mesh. And under our options, we have our point locations. And by default, it's set to automatic. So it's going to select automatically points within your boundaries to track to create your mesh. And it does a pretty good job. But if you're finding that you're having issues, our other option is uniform. So you can use the uniform point location method. And if we're selected on uniform, we can change our horizontal and our vertical spacing with these sliders. I can change my vertical. And additionally, we can still add, we can remove, we can hold our control and select multiple points and manipulate them. So I'm going to go back to automatic. When we're under our automatic setting, we have point number limit. So this is going to limit the amount of points you have. So I can increase them if I want more points. And when it comes to tracking, the number you have on your points isn't going to increase or decrease your track time. Because when you track, it's tracking all the surfaces within, not necessarily the exact point. So it's really not going to affect your tracking, whether you have hundreds or just a few. Now under here, this minimum point spacing, if you find we're bunching up a little too much, like around her lip area here, we can increase this minimum point spacing to change the minimum spacing between points. Now, once we've got our points all set up, we want to move to our track button. And our track button is pretty familiar. It looks like most other track nodes. So we've got go to frame, start and end. We've got our tracking backwards, tracking forward and backwards, tracking forward, track backwards 1 frame, track forward 1 frame. And if we are actively tracking, this stop button will be available to stop your track. Because if you do find you're having issues with a track, you can stop your track and you can use these trimming menus to go back And even if you're in the middle of a track, you can still come in here and manipulate your points. So if I need to manipulate this point, I can manipulate this point. Just know that once we're in tracking, you can't add or remove points. You'd have to go back to your mesh and then restart your track all again. So you can manipulate points, you just can't add or remove points once we're in the tracking mode. And then your trimming down here will allow you to remove the tracking data before whatever frame you're on. This will allow you to track from the last known match. This will remove the tracking data at whatever frame you're on, and this will remove the tracking data after whatever frame you're on. Under our tracking behavior, this is where we set up our motion range. So if you find your footage is moving pretty fast, which she's moving pretty quick, like her lip area and her eye area, I want to give myself a large motion range so our track can find these motions. So if I increase this, it's going to give us larger motion range. So it's going to give it a larger search area to find where it's supposed to be. If I minimize it, it's going to be a smaller search area. For our mesh rigidity, this is just how rigid our mesh is going to be. So if I increase it, it's going to be very rigid, meaning it's not going to move much. And if I lower it, it's going to be extremely fluid. Under your quality, that's just your faster or better, and it's going to depend on your computer whether you want to use faster or better. Faster is generally pretty good, and if you're having issues with your track, leave it on faster, manipulate your stuff, and then continue your track. And then once you got everything set, you can retrack it under better. But I'm going to leave it on faster and go ahead and track forward. So there we go. We got a pretty good track. You can see it's a little jittery. So that's where the better comes in. If I had set it to better, some of this jittery stuff wouldn't be happening. Like at this point right here, jittering. But for this breakdown, that's good. Under our interactions overlays, this is just to show or hide our little overlay here. So we can hide them, or we can hide on drag. So if I click it and drag it, it'll hide it. Now, once we got our track set up, we can go to our result and we can see our results. And before I go over our operation, we have our overlay placement. And this positioning is going to determine how our little interactive display here is going to work. So let's go ahead and bring something in to put on our face. And that's what this green input is for. So if we want to directly input something on our face to replace that texture, we can. So now we've got some video retextured using that warped mesh that we tracked. So on our tracker by default is set to interactive canvas. That means we're getting this little interactive canvas. So we can come in here and we can manipulate our little graphic if we want. And you can change it however you want. You can see it's moves in multiple directions. So you can manipulate your little canvas however you want. Our other option right here is sliders. So if we select sliders, we get this canvas position sliders menu system. So we can change it on the X, the Y, we can zoom it, we can rotate it, we can change the width, the height, we can change the pitch, the yaw, and we can flip it horizontally or vertically. And then our last one is our interactive pins. So if we select interactive pins, we get these two little pins to manipulate our little canvas here. So it's a little wanky, but that's how that works. So let's go back to our sliders here and let's position our canvas correctly. And there we go. Now down here, we also have our interactions overlays, which is to show, hide, or hide on drag, which is our little overlays. We can show, hide them or hide on drag. Under our reference frames here, we can set our reference frame. So you want to set your flattest, most direct to the camera frame as your reference frame. And since that is our frame 1 or frame 0 here in Fusion, we just want to set that to our current frame. But if you wanted to something else, like say 75, you could just set current frame. Additionally, you can change your reference frame here. And this reset position right here will reset the positioning of our little graphic that we had in here. And our anti-aliasing will just help us anti-alias anything we're having issues with. So I'm going to go back to frame 0 and set to that frame. And under our operation, this is how we dictate how our output is operating. So by default, it's set to warp input 2, which is input 2 onto input 1. So if we play, our warp is on input 1 from input 2. We can also select warp input 2 onto blank, which means it's just going to give us a blank canvas. We can select warp input 1's alpha channel. So we can just import the alpha channel of that. We can create a mesh alpha mask. So we can create a meshed alpha mask to go out. Additionally, we can stabilize the warp on input 1, which is just going to give us a stabilized warped image. So if we need to do any changes here, we would make the changes. And the way this works when we're using this is any work we want to do, we do it to it. So let's say we've got our output coming out, and I'm going to add a merge node in this. And let's say we want, I don't know, to bring my little logo in. And we're going to merge it on top there. Let's get a transform node. So this is what we want to put on top of it. Let's go to our merge node and let's just change that to multiply. Now, if I wanted to rewarp this back onto the original, what we'd have to do is select our surface tracker, hit Control C, copy it, paste it. We're going to bring our original footage back into the input, and then our changed footage we will want to bring into 2. And then on this surface tracker, we would go to rewarp stabilized clip. So now our clip is rewarped on top of that footage. So that's how that works. So you want to go from your original footage back into input 1. A copy of this surface tracker, instead of being set to stabilized warp, you want it set to rewarp stabilized with your new updated footage into input 2. So let's go ahead and delete that. And that is the rewarp stabilized mode. So let's go back to warp onto 1. Now under our warp stuff, we have this ability to overlay / alpha source. And by default, it's set to every single frame. So each frame is going to rewarp on top. If we have it set to reference frame only, it's going to use that reference frame to warp up. And if we have it set to first frame, it's going to use the first frame to rewarp everything back down. Under here, we can contract or expand our little warped mask area. Additionally, we can add softness to it if we want. And we can add some motion blur to it. And it's going to kind of fake motion blur. It's not going to be real motion blur. It's going to be a faked motion blur that's kind of overlaid on top. And then finally, we have compositing right down here. We can composite straight in if we need to. So we can select whatever compositing type we want to use. And we can change the opacity of that right here. So now we've got our little media footage warped to our face. So let's go ahead and jump into our next little example. So right here, this is a typical use case. We've got some footage and we want to put a logo on our shirt. So again, shift space, surface tracker. Let's look at our little area. I'm going to create a bound, and I'm just going to do it at the top part of our shirt here. I'm going to make sure I delete anything I don't want in. I'm going to go to mesh, and this time I'm going to use uniform, and I'm going to minimize this to say 12 to give us tons of them. Then I'm going to go to our little track button here, and for a motion range, I'm going to increase our motion range, and I'm going to drop our rigidity way down, and I'm going to track it forward. So now we've got our track. We can go ahead and go to result, and let's bring in another logo. So I'll bring in my studio logo. Let's say I want to input that there. I'm going to go to our little display and change my size up so it's all fitting correctly. If I go back to fit and play, you can see our logo's kind of sitting there, but there's some wanky stuff going on. And the reason this is happening is shadows. So I'm going to let you know right now that one of the biggest problems with this node is going to be any shadows that are occurring, because within here, we don't have our typical track settings where we can change the luminance or the colors or how or what we're looking for when we're tracking. Every little shadow that comes in here is going to start displacing your little area here. So as we play, you can see when these shadows move, it kind of pops. So it's causing some weird issues here. So the best way to fix that is just by manipulating your mesh or changing your size to try to make sure it's not in any of these shadows. And to give you a better example, we're going to move over to this one, which is this footage right here. And before we start our surface tracker, the first thing I want to do is create some occlusion, because our footage, her hands go up and covers the shirt. So I want to occlude these areas. Now on our surface tracker, we have this pink input, which is our occlusion area. So I'm going to go ahead and add a magic mask. And let's find where our hands are up. There we go. And I'm going to select some of our skin here. Let's go ahead and track forward and backwards. So there we go. We got a decent mat, and if we look at our alpha channel, we can go ahead and finesse our mat a little bit, so we can erode it or dilate it. So I'm going to make it a little larger. I'm going to increase our gamma here, and I'm going to bring this down just so we're not getting some of these shadows in here. So this is what we want to use as an occlusion. So if I go ahead and add a surface tracker, I'm going to bring in our media, and I'm going to take this mask and I'm going to input it into our little occlusion area here. So if I turn my color back on, let's go to the beginning, and let's add our bounds. Let's go to our mesh, and let's change that to uniform. Go to our track. We're going to increase our motion range. Actually, I'm going to push it all the way up. I'm going to make this very fluid. And let's go ahead and track forward. So now we've got our track. You can see kind of what's happening here with these shadows. So this is all right until we have some weird bounce right here. And that's because of this shadow that's coming in on our t-shirt. And then right here, even though we have her hands occluded and it's working fine, this shadow from her hand is pushing that right on over. So you can see it gets a little confused by shadows. So anytime you're working with this stuff, you want to make sure you include any occlusions. So we realistically, we would want to create an occlusion around this entire shadow area. And with this little issue right here, we'd want to create an occlusion here. But the bad thing is this is actually a wrinkle that should be affecting our little mesh here. But it's being thrown off by that shadow. So take it for what it is. This does a fairly decent job for some easier stuff like this. But for some more difficult tasks, this node still needs a little help. But we'll see what future updates bring to it. And that is the Surface Tracker node. Have fun playing with it. And I will see you in the next node breakdown.